Previously on Dark Side of the Ring. When the wrestling business became a one-company industry, Jeff and Jarrett bet everything on a new promotion, Total Nonstop Action, better known as TNA.
Some people called me stupid, naive, an idiot.
He had the guts and the nuts to start his own promotion, and TNA was born.
It really had that feeling of anything can happen. They had a strong roster. They had great production. They were a serious #2 contender to the WWE.
What began as a family business quickly spiraled beyond the Jarrett's control.
Dixie Carter is smarter than what people give her credit for. She wanted the power.
Dixie pulled me aside and said, "You are not to call Jeff boss."
I get a call from Dixie. "How did you not tell me Jeff and Karen are together? I had no idea."
She was going to try anything to get him out. She finally got her wish.
The whole thing is nonsense.
She nuked his whole fucking life.
With Jeff Jarrett sidelined, Dixie Carter places her faith in Hulk Hogan and Eric Bischoff, reshaping the balance of power within TNA.
It revealed to me immediately he doesn't have a clue about TNA wrestling. Like, zero clue or context of who or what we are.
I think she thought, oh, I'm gonna bring Hulk Hogan in here and everybody's gonna love me. Oh, look what Dixie did. Look what the fuck Dixie did.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Dixie Carter!
It's really hard to put into words how I felt watching the product while I was sitting at home. How's my little baby? How's it gonna be? Is it gonna turn out all right? But Hogan was on the way, and so for the brand, I was excited about that.
I'd like to introduce you to my new business partner, Dixie Carter. This is the company that's going to lead the way in the future. I guarantee that.
Hulk Hogan believed passionately until the day he died. Still hard for me to say that there was a tremendous amount of power and value in the Hulk Hogan brand, and he was right. And I believe that Hulk believed that he could bring that value to TNA and help the little engine that couldn't achieve.
With Hulk Hogan now in the fold, Dixie Carter moves to consolidate her power, issuing the roster a stark ultimatum.
We get this notice that there's this big meeting and there's gonna be cameras there. So, you kind of have to have your face on and whatnot. And Dixie comes out.
It's time for a change. You can choose to support me or you can choose not to. But you'll need to find another place to work.
If you don't like it, it's my way or the highway. And if you're starving, let them eat cake. We didn't appreciate that because we've been working our asses off for you, and we're not asking for anything we have not earned. And you want to reprimand us for that?
It was one of those meetings that single-handedly pulled a lot of the morale out of the room.
It turns out that not only was recorded, but we played that back later in the show. That's when she lost the absolute complete respect for the entire locker room.
It was not about anything other than her ego.
I expect you to support me 100%.
And you can go back and look at the faces. Talent really understood this is who we're working for. But I think a lot of them, and including myself, where do things go now? And then all of a sudden, I had a phone call from an attorney that worked for Panda. "Hey, Jeff, we want you to come back." At that time, that just rocked my world. I was just like, wow. You could see clearly what her strategy was. Dixie wanted a thumb on me to really know what I was doing. I've been around a long time, and I knew the cards they were playing, but I still was a little skeptical. And I said, "What all do you have in mind?" I was brought back doing live events and international. When I returned, you put on a game face. I wasn't exactly sure about the different chess pieces, but my best strategy is, let's let this play out.
With Hulk Hogan and Eric Bischoff joining TNA's creative team, they found themselves once again working with head writer Vince Russo, It was a partnership carrying years of baggage.
Russo, I think, told Jarrett to lie down.
Over a decade earlier, in a shocking moment, backstage tensions erupted in front of a live audience, blurring the line between reality and fiction.
I don't think anybody agreed to that.
Now, the same trio was together again in TNA.
Hogan, you big bald son of a bitch, kiss my ass!
At the time, the creative team is myself, Ed Ferrara, and Matt Conway. And what we are told by Dixie is, guys, Eric is only involved in the Hulk Hogan creative. He's gonna come and he's gonna sit with you guys creatively and just talk about what's going on with Hulk.
Hulk Hogan had real issues with Vince Russo, professionally, creatively, was not interested in working anywhere near Vince Russo. I had to have a sit down with Vince Russo to kind of clear the air, so to speak, and we both shook hands and agreed, let's try to make it work.
Eric's entire plan, entire mindset was to somehow, some way get power in the company. I knew what he was doing.
We're starting over.
I knew his game, and that's the rest is history.
I mean, creatively, I was leading the charge. I just kind of evolved into that, partly because I have a pretty strong personality.
And what we're going to do is turn this company upside down, starting, I don't know, right now.
It took a few months for me to understand the role that Hulk was going to play in TNA, and I thought he was coming in as brand ambassador. I quickly learned he's literally going to be handed the keys to the brand.
And the change starts tonight.
I didn't know that he was going to be completely revamping the roster.
Mr. Anderson is in TNA. Thank you, Hulk Hogan.
It was like if you're a personal friend of Hulk Hogan's that works at the grocery store. Oh, come on, you can be on the TV show.
They let some people who was famous in the 80s that did some stuff and made an impact come in and tell us that the things we were doing were wrong and unprofessional. And I felt like that was bullshit.
I'm sure there was a lot of money, going, in different directions, and egos, a lot of egos coming to the surface.
They weren't going to add to the product. They kind of came in and they got a spot and they got paid.
It became real clear what Hulk's vision was, and that was complete rebranding of the entire product. And I knew what a massive failure it was going to be. They didn't know the TNA audience.
Welcome to the brand new Impact Zone, guys.
I think the single biggest thing he did that was totally ego-driven was get rid of the six-sided ring.
I got one thing to say about six sides. You had it, and it only got you so far.
That was a staple. That was one of the hallmarks of being TNA. The hardcore TNA fans, they wanted the six-sided ring.
I thought it was stupid, frankly. Like, if you're gonna have a six-sided ring, use the damn thing. Create something inside of that ring that happens as a result of the fact that you're in a six-sided ring. Otherwise, it doesn't affect anything that happens on the mat. Then it's just stupid.
Now do you understand why I have problems and issues? You are doing what's best for Hulk, not what's best for TNA. And what? We're all supposed to sit there and say, oh yeah, bro, that's a great, oh yeah, bro. No, bro, it's bullshit. It's bullshit. We work for TNA. You work for Hulk Hogan. That's the difference.
Determined to put TNA on the map, Eric Bischoff turns to the past, reviving a strategy that had worked for him decades earlier.
WCW kicked WWE's ass for 2 solid years, going head-to-head on Monday night. I went back to, I won't say a bag of tricks necessarily, but I went back to a strategy.
This is the biggest night in the history of TNA.
You going head-to-head with WWE was going to make so much noise. It was about creating awareness.
I thought it was the dumbest thing. Trying to go Monday Night Live with a company that spends more on pyro than we spend on production.
When you put our show next to their show at the same time, they are gonna look like $1 million and we are gonna look like trailer trash. We didn't have the money to compete with them.
Countless amount of people came up to me and would say, how long are you gonna let this go on, Jeff? And I would say, I'm powerless.
7 years ago, I founded TNA. You know something, Jeff? So what? Nobody cares. With Hulk Hogan and Dixie Carter, TNA is going all the way, brother, to the top.
From the day Hulk came in, it was less than 12 months that we went from profitability to financial death spiral.
With Hogan and Bischoff calling the shots, TNA takes its biggest gamble yet, moving Impact head-to-head with WWE's Monday Night Raw.
I don't remember what the viewership was, but I think the most watched Impact episode in history was some of that head-to-head competition, at least the first night. TNA had never had that big of an audience before. I was realistic. I knew why I was doing it, and I was pretty convinced that it wasn't going to work long term.
I don't even remember how long it lasted, but yeah, it did not work well.
You had one that was a major league product, and then you had another one which was like a smaller product, up and coming. Unless you both have that major look, you can't really go head to head with the giant in the industry.
It killed momentum. It made us look like amateurs trying to play in the big boy pond. Our house show attendance dropped. Our Nielsen numbers dropped. We were the fly on the ass of a rhino.
To this day, this is what I believe. Hulk wanted to come in and move some chess pieces to create his next raise. And I'm in a bad place here in that I can't voice my opinion because it will sound self-serving.
With declining ratings and the failed attempt to reignite the Monday Night Wars hanging over the company, the creative team turns to one of wrestling's oldest formulas, turning real-life conflict into compelling television. Just months after Jeff Jarrett returns to TNA, he's asked to step back into the ring.
I will never forget this conversation. And if I could do a good Vince Russo impersonation, I would. But I get this, bro, what do you got, Vince? We need this story.
My job is to get as many eyeballs on that show as possible. That is my job. Without a shadow of a doubt, I was gonna pitch the angle to them. If they weren't good with it, fine.
I was asked to be in a storyline with Jeff and with my ex-husband. In the storyline of Jeff took me from Kurt.
And I said, okay, Vince, I know you and your crazy ideas, but you got to get some sign off. I've already done it. That's what turned my head. I said, do what? Yeah. I said, so Dixie signed off? Yep.
It was obvious to me that there was a tremendous amount of strain between Dixie and Jeff, and now we're going to add, oh, I don't know, a love triangle with Kurt's ex-wife and Jeff Jarrett on top of that stress.
Kurt Angle, the 1996 Olympic gold medalist, the father, the husband, well, the ex-husband.
I just sat back and chuckled. Jeff's the bad guy. And Kurt's this American gold medalist that lost his wife. And here's this evil bitch.
You will not steal the joy from our lives for one more day!
People wanted to root for Kurt. It was easy for them to hate us.
It was only a matter of time before the whole world saw Karen and Jeff for who they truly are.
You add the story to it and just start stirring the pot.
I can say I watched two men put their differences aside and work for the betterment of TNA. And by doing that, they stepped in that ring for me too. And I had mad respect for both of them.
It by far, to me, was the most productive storyline TNA ever had.
The downfall is people believed it. They thought it was real.
To this day, I get comments online like, "Are you and Kurt okay?" And I'm like, you do realize that we co-parent kids and have since 2010.
Jeff wasn't screwing Kurt's wife. Jeff didn't take Kurt's wife. Do you think if that was the case, Kurt Angle would go through that with that storyline? No.
You may kiss your bride.
That's not what happened. It was a fucking storyline.
Less than 12 months ago, we're going to send Jeff home because of the dastardly deed he did. And now all of a sudden we're going to bring him back, and not only bring him back, we're going to create a storyline on this tragic situation that I was such a horrible person. Dixie's power play was never about her compassion for Kurt, never about her concern for the brand or the company. It was always about herself, putting herself in power.
As chaos grows behind the scenes, TNA's pursuit of star power culminates in one of the most infamous nights in company history, Victory Road 2011.
In 2010, coming back to TNA, I mean, Dixie was totally involved then, right? It seemed like things were different. And that was a real dark time in my personal life. I always go back to that night, you know, I'm like, oh my God, because it was such an embarrassing thing.
Everybody backstage pretty much knew that Jeff was involved in drugs. For the most part, he had it under control.
I'm in the truck, I'm directing, and it's the main event, it's the last match. And I tell D'Lo Brown, he's the agent on the match, he's on headsets by the go position. What do you know about this match, D'Lo Brown? He goes, hold on a second, hold on.
Jeff comes up, and within seconds of being around him, I know he's not in his right state of mind. I can just tell.
I had wrestled earlier, and I remember being so excited for Jeff to be in the main event against Sting, the guy that he looked up to, and it was a very high-profile match, obviously. Jeff was getting ready to go out, and someone had buzzed me and said, Jeff is not in a good state. And I just remember my heart dropped, and I'm like, oh my God.
That's when Eric Bischoff popped up, and he's starting to ask what's going on. And somehow we agreed to let him go to the ring to see if he could walk it off, or when he got in front of the crowd, maybe he would pop back into normal Jeff.
And he comes out, and I can see that he's tagged. I'm like, oh my God, Jeff is fucked up on something.
Jeff Hardy, moment of truth has arrived.
And he's doing all this weird stuff, like taking his shirt off and teasing someone in the crowd.
What the hell is Jeff Hardy doing here?
Everybody was kind of looking at each other, including Dixie. It's like, what do we do? What next?
During the 2011 Victory Road pay-per-view, what should have been the biggest match of the night quickly descended into confusion and panic as Jeff Hardy made his way to the ring. Backstage, it became painfully clear that Hardy was in no condition to compete.
I had seen Jeff earlier and seemed okay, but I was not in tune with anything going on that day. And I got a call. Russo, bro, get over here now.
Eric Bischoff comes out right before they ring the bell after the introduction.
Slight change in plans.
So I got close to Jeff, and I told him, turn around and get the fuck out of this ring. Walk back to the locker room. Just leave now. Nothing. Didn't register.
It's all pretty much a blur, but I remember Eric Bischoff saying, just like it was like, get rid of that piece of trash. I can't believe he would do this to these people that have paid to watch this pay-per-view and these people that have worked so hard to put this show on.
So I went over to Sting and just said, hit him with your finish.
Yo, right now,
Oh, wow.
Sting.
Right off the bat. Scorpion death drop. Here's
Not
one.
playing games.
Got him. Great.
What you saw, that Jeff Hardy that was in that ring, I mean, complete, just drug addict that had given up on him. himself to be that irresponsible and that dangerous, to go out there with somebody else's life, you know, that's in your hands and that you have to protect. It was just so careless and reckless.
I'll never forget coming back from the hotel. I went straight to the truck, went to playback, and just said, hey man, what actually happened? They just showed me 15 seconds, and I'm like, I got it. I got real angry at first. How in the world could you let him walk through that curtain? And then I began to hear a few different versions. I knew the reality that was I could only make things worse, so I left.
It was embarrassing for everybody involved.
There's a million right choices and one wrong one, and we did the wrong one.
At that time, I felt confused in that, how did Jeff get himself to a spot that he couldn't go perform? I had no comprehension of what the disease of addiction is. It's cunning, it's baffling, and it's powerful.
I hope that people have forgiven me, you know. Forgiveness is such a huge thing in recovery, man. And forgiving yourself can be super hard, you know, when it comes to that. It took me a long time to forgive myself for that night. But ultimately, that was me, but it's not me, you know. That's what I was, but not what I am. It was like the drug addict Jeff Hardy died that night, because in a way I needed that to realize how bad I was.
That was the wake-up call that it took for him to totally stop taking pills altogether. So that is the only positive that I can say came out of it when it was all said and done.
I hate that it happened for Jeff. I hate that it happened for the brand. I hate that it happened on Dixie's watch. She moved me out and she's in. So no matter who you put under her, she's ultimately responsible. And this happened on her watch.
By the end of 2011, a sober Jeff Hardy redeems himself by defeating Jeff Jarrett in a loser leaves TNA match.
Oh my God! Oh!
Allowing Jarrett to step away from the ring and focus on new ventures, including Ring Ka King, a TNA offshoot based in India.
By this time, the financial situation was beginning to get bad, and it was going from bad to worse.
With the company's financials trending downward, Hulk Hogan's time in TNA comes to an end, less than 4 years after it began.
I know that a lot of you are not happy with some of the decisions I've made lately.
I just remember when Hulk made up his mind that it was time for him to leave. We wanted to do it within the context of a storyline, as opposed to Hulk just leaving.
Hulk Hogan, we have some business in the ring now.
It was probably my idea to have Dixie go as far as she did, trying to get Hulk Hogan to stay.
It's an amazing offer for somebody else, not me, because I quit.
All angles, it's embarrassing. Just brutal, man. But, you know, Dixie probably thought it was great because she was on TV.
That's Eric Bischoff's character. I don't even want to know the amount of those checks that she wrote to both of them. And then, because Hogan's got creative control, they're gonna write him out that way to completely 1000% humiliate her. Humiliate her. That shows you his character. That is disgusting.
What an incredible masterpiece of a job that Hulk and Eric and whoever else was involved convinced her to do that. I would have never done that if I was Dixie. It said everything about her knowledge of the industry.
As the company slips deeper into financial trouble, Jeff Jarrett turns to a legendary country music artist for help.
My old buddy Toby Keith, you know, Toby saw the little engine that could in TNA month after month and year after year grow to heights. I saw him at a show and he asked how things were going, and I said, Toby, it's a financial death spiral. He's like, damn, and you don't have no power? I said, zero. He said, let's get it back. And I said, you're serious? He said, I am dead effing serious. Attorneys met Toby at his golf course, and went into their song and dance about, Mr. Keith, we sure would like to get you on board. And he said, folks, there's no doubt I know what Toby Keith's brand can do. But are we talking about with or without Jeff? They hemmed and hawed and stammered around and said, well, we can kind of talk about it. He said, we have nothing to talk about. Jeff's my guy, and if Jeff's not running the show, I'm out. And he got up and walked to the tee box. So that's when I knew that the nose wasn't coming up. So I said, yeah, I've spent enough time on this, and that's when I hit send on the email that I resigned from the company.
Though Jeff Jarrett departs TNA, he remains determined to make his mark on the wrestling business, launching a new promotion, Global Force Wrestling.
Kind of got my head together and named the company in 2014. I ran the Grand Slam Tour, the 20-something baseball shows, and my old Canadian buddies from Anthem. Acquired TNA. Dixie was essentially reduced to a few points, if you will.
There came a point where Bob and Janice Carter, Dixie's parents, had had enough. We've spent enough money. So Dixie was out and Anthem took the company over. And they had wanted to change the TNA name for years. They changed it to Impact, because at least that was less offensive than the childishness. The new owners of TNA get together with Global Force Wrestling.
I'll never forget Ed Nordholm from Anthem Sports and Entertainment. He said, oh, I know you got Global Force, but is there a way to take the old brand and merge them together? Karen was very skeptical.
I get PTSD from hearing that. I think Jeff thought, hey, I did this once. I can do it again. A lot changed in the world of wrestling and network TV.
And man, we can make this thing run again.
I'm taking the joint back over, the place that I built.
When Jeff came back with Anthem, it's probably the darkest I ever saw of Jeff Jarrett. And I think one of the mistakes Jeff made when he came back was that he was kind of like on a revenge tour. He wanted to stick it to Dixie. He wanted to stick it to everybody we felt was not on his side when he left.
I kind of knew in my heart of hearts that I was struggling. In less than 2 months, the realities became crystal clear. I was fed a bunch of bullshit. That here I am now merging the brands and there is no money. And so if people thought I was angry or upset, they were right.
He was a shell of the human being that he was before. It wasn't the same Jeff. He was so broken. I felt sorry for him. He was worried about taking care of me, taking care of our kids. Part of me justified his drinking.
He was battling some substance issues, and he was trying, though. We didn't say anything because it's Jeff Jarrett, he's the boss, but we kind of knew, and it saddened us because we felt he wasn't making the best decisions for the company in that moment.
I pass no judgment. I come from a family that's had a lot of addiction problems, but clearly, at that point in time, Jeff was not in a great space.
A cardinal rule that I had for years is I would never drink until I knew not only that my match was over, is that I would not be really in public. And I started breaking that rule and having a little bit here and a little bit there.
I tried to get him to get help several times, but he just, I don't have a problem. I don't have a problem. He had a problem.
And, you know, I'll never forget that, man, I was at a pool party in my backyard, and I looked down at my gut, and I go, not on my watch. I'm never going to have a beer gut. And that day, I switched to vodka. Literally that day. That was not a good decision.
He would start drinking at 10 a.m., or he would drink all day. I wasn't just watching from the outside. I was living it. He was killing himself.
With his drinking problem worsening, Jeff leaves Karen behind and travels to Mexico for AAA's Triple Mania, one of the country's biggest wrestling events.
I mean, I have processed this scene so many different times. Flew down on a Friday morning, show on a Saturday. That entire Friday, I was called to the building, hang out in the dressing room, we'll come get you for rehearsals. Well, I had the bottle in my bag, and noon came along, and had one drink, and 2 came along, another drink, and another drink, and another drink, and another drink. And it got 9 or 10 o'clock at night on the Friday, and I'd never done a rehearsal, and it was time for me to go to the hotel. So we loaded up, and so that's when that drunk started, on the Friday midday. And woke up the next day, like any active alcoholic, get up, have a good breakfast, and I'm gonna have me a drink before I go to the building. And one thing led to another.
Jeff, you gotta go in the ring. Come on. No, motherfucker.
It was, you know, very obvious to folks that I was under no condition to perform. Before I knew it, I went out, had no business going to the ring.
I believe he's throwing some promotional. Wait a minute. Is that what I think it is? He's throwing out tortillas. Amazing that Jeff Jarrett would travel all the way to Mexico City from Hendersonville, Tennessee to disrespect and mock this crowd and their culture.
Bullshit is what it is. Get the fuck out of here. Fuck you.
It was an ugly situation. I flew home on Labor Day, came into the office on that Tuesday, and Lynn Asper and Ed were at the office. And then Ed just said, hey, we want you to go to outpatient treatment. And that really caught me off guard.
When the decision was made to send Jeff to rehab, at that point, I think Jeff was pretty mad at me. And I said, if Jeff never talks to me again, but gets clean, I'll be okay with that.
Him being sent home that second time, disastrous for him. Absolutely disastrous. The canoe tipped and completely fucking capsized.
Once again sent home from the company he helped build, Jeff Jarrett enters outpatient treatment for alcoholism.
I cleaned my office out. They said, you got 6 weeks, and let's get this thing under control. I went to outpatient treatment for 4 hours a day for 6 weeks. I sat at the front of the class, took the best notes, put on the mask of Jeff, the outpatient, that's gonna kick this drinking problem's ass. And there was a double shot in Calgary and Edmonton. The following Fridays when I got on the plane, sit down in first class, the stewardess came by and she's got her little notepad and she said, Mr. Jarrett, can I get you anything to drink? And I literally said, I'll take a double rum and Coke. At the time, I had no idea how much of a denial I was in. I drank all the way to Calgary, and after it was over, get on a plane, continue to drink, went home, woke up on Sunday, continued to drink.
The scariest thing about like places like that, the rock bottom places, is man, it's just like, how am I gonna survive this? How am I gonna get through this? So I'm sure Jeff was in that spot to where like, oh my God, how am I gonna come back from this?
There were 2 different times that I had to call 911 because I couldn't get him awake and was worried that he was dying. Just, it got so bad.
I was out of my mind. And on that Monday morning, I woke up, she'd gotten the kids to school, and I was sitting in my recliner, TV on. She walked back in, and she just said, Jeff, what are you going to do? And you can call it a moment of clarity. I call it God speaking through me. I said, I'm going to treatment. And she just kind of looked at me and she said, are you serious? I said, yes. I couldn't really believe how things had transpired. Like, how in the hell did I get myself in this position? She started making the calls, and finally she got the WWE Wellness folks on the phone.
Then we got on a plane and we flew to Tampa. I was scared and I was worried just leaving him there and not being able to be there with him. I didn't want to leave him.
I didn't even know what an alcoholic truly was before I got to treatment. For me, it all started as the little scared 5-year-old boy who was sent to go to a private school. The only one there that the dad never showed up. The dad was on TV wrestling. When I came to the realization that I had resentment at my dad, estrangement on any relationship is painful. But I liken it to dragging a massive ball around on your ankle. You're pulling that anger, you're pulling that resentment, you're pulling that bad relationship. But we knew that wrestling had, specifically TNA, had really driven a wedge. And since that, we had time to reconnect, and he knew that I had a problem.
When Jeff reconciled with his dad, it was definitely a tough thing. I'm grateful that it happened.
Understanding that when Owen fell 82 feet to his death, and I was in the ring and walked through the crater that his body left, and me sensing it, but stuffing it and putting on an emotional mask that I had no idea I had on. Dealing with the passing of my first wife with 3 kids, and knowing that I've got to run an organization, I got to be a dad, I've got to wear these different masks. I didn't even know who I was at this point. In those 56 days, I finally got really rigorous, honest with myself. Got out a few days before Christmas. I was super grateful just to be home and alive.
To see him, go to treatment and just be the greatest human being he possibly can be, it's just so inspirational.
The first Sunday of 2018, the phone rang, and his WWE. Went into the bathroom. Karen, I just got a phone call. And she just stopped in her tracks, and we connected eyes through her looking in her mirror. Vince wants to put me in the Hall of Fame. I was completely overwhelmed with emotion. The journey that I had traveled since 1993, WWF runs, and the WCW runs, and the IC title, and the world title, and the TNA years, and treatment. And this is how 2018 started. I was blown away.
Karen and the kids, we've been through a lot. You guys are my rock. And to my dad, we've had our ups and downs, but I thank the good Lord that we're on a up. And thank you for what you've done for me in this business.
Without those valleys, it's impossible to have the mountaintops. Now, where Jeff Jarrett is at in 2026, I work for AEW, and AEW is founded by a guy who, at the very end of the day, we're so aligned in one thing, and that's the passion of professional wrestling.
Jeff has so much experience in pro wrestling. He's been involved in thousands of wrestling live events all over the world, and so I love having Jeff in the office.
I don't even really know how to put it into words, because when I started at AEW, I was a heel. And then all of a sudden, I'm asked to be in the Owen Hart Invitational Tournament. The producer sat me down, much like the camera in front of me now. They asked, "Hey Jeff, what does Owen mean to you?" And to this day, I'll get emotional.
It's hard for me to imagine. It's been 25 years. But there's so many things about Owen that I remember like it was yesterday.
And there was no wrestling storyline, there was no angle, there was none of that. And that resonated somehow, some way. Entered the tournament, And quote unquote, I was walking through the curtain as a heel. But the people that night in Chicago, I'll never forget that. They accepted me as a babyface. There was a massive full circle moment for myself. That the kid from Hendersonville, it was special.
I think Jeff Jarrett is in a great place. He's sober, he's healthy, he's happy, he looks great. For all the hard-hitting action and wrestling he's been through in the great matches, Jeff still moves around like a young man, whether it's competing in the ring or helping train the young wrestlers, where Jeff has great ideas and great insights.
I think Jeff's greatest joy is working with younger talent. He loves teaching. He loves watching people grow, become stars. There's a certain gratification in contributing to the making of a talent.
I'm more excited and engaged and passionate about professional wrestling today than I ever have been.
Jeff will never retire. He will be 90 years old and somehow still contributing to this business.
I'm very grateful for Jeff Jarrett taking the chance, rolling the dice, starting TNA himself, and making that into a place. Like he's changed the business. I mean, there's no doubt about it. And he has been heavily influential in the business, and I think he will be for a long time to come.
Between Jeff's understanding of the business, Jeff's eye for talent, Jeff's dedication, Jeff's commitment, Jeff's hard work, if Jeff would have never lost control of that company, God knows where TNA would be right now. I mean that from the bottom of my heart.
Nashville, Tennessee has been the home of TNA wrestling for more than 2 decades.
Should have died 1,000 deaths already. But it's still kicking.
To be a pro wrestler in TNA here in 2026, and the last couple years has been so great for my brother and I, and whoever said that they wouldn't last, I mean, they are proven wrong.
I hope the fact that TNA is still alive and kicking makes Jeff feel proud. The entity that's called TNA today, although it is a completely different company, wouldn't exist had it not been for Jeff and Jerry Jarrett.
TNA is absolutely thriving today with everything it's gone through. It feels like TNA is just a microcosm of Jeff Jarrett's life. Still standing somehow.
The story of TNA is the story of Jeff Jarrett because TNA is Jeff Jarrett.
If Jeff Jarrett would have disappeared when Joe got sick and passed, if Jeff Jarrett would have disappeared with all the drama with him and Karen, if Jeff would have disappeared in 2017 and wouldn't have kept just fighting and coming back and believing when there's no rational reason to believe, then we don't have one of the greatest success stories that's ever transpired.
Not how many times you get knocked down, so many times you back up. And a lot of people get knocked down in life. Everybody has setbacks, but every time he's gotten knocked down, he's gotten back up and coming back stronger. So
some people called me stupid, naive, an idiot, but I bet on myself. And that is something that I can look my children in their eyes, get up to bat, get in the game. It makes life so rewarding.
Parents meticulously instill within Gail profound, lifelong appreciation for hard work, unwavering effort, moral integrity, and the joy derived from earned rewards. They were a loving household. My grandparents understood that you had to work hard to be able to appreciate the fun things in life. This fundamental lesson, imparted early and reinforced often, profoundly shaped Gail's approach to both her rigorous studies and her chosen professional career, infusing them with purpose and diligence. From her formative early years, Gail distinguished herself not merely by her innate intelligence, but more importantly, by an unwavering, almost fierce dedication to academic excellence and intellectual pursuit. My Aunt Gail, growing up, they always described her as very studious. She was very, very intelligent. She graduated as salutatorian of her high school. This remarkable academic prowess served as a powerful stepping stone, meticulously paving the way for her pursuit a noble, deeply compassionate, and profoundly demanding career path. When my mom graduated from high school, she went to Northwestern to study to become a nurse. The intentional choice of nursing, a profession that intrinsically demands both acute intellectual acuity, meticulous attention to detail, and profound, boundless empathy, speaks volumes about the very core of Gail's character and her innate desire to care for others. Her post-graduation career flourished with remarkable speed and success, quickly establishing her as a highly respected and immensely capable professional within the challenging medical field. Post-graduation, she became a very successful NICU nurse, where she took care of the tiniest and most fragile little babies and enjoyed her job immensely. The specialization in neonatal intensive care unit, NICU, nursing is profoundly indicative of Gail's inner strength, her remarkable capacity for empathy, and her unwavering nurturing spirit. Caring for the most vulnerable of human lives, the tiniest and most fragile little babies, demands immense, almost saint-like patience, an almost obsessive, meticulous attention to the minutest detail, profound emotional resilience in the face of constant life and death struggles, and an unwavering, fierce commitment to preserving and enhancing life at its most nascent stages. Such a demanding calling, so fundamentally life-affirming and relentlessly dedicated to protecting fragile existence, stands in stark, irreconcilable, and utter contradiction to the very idea of self-destruction. The entire essence of her professional life was dedicated, unequivocally, to safeguarding and fighting for life, making the notion of her willingly ending her own life utterly inconceivable and utterly absurd to everyone who intimately knew her work and her passion. By her late 20s, Gail had firmly established her thriving professional career in the bustling city of Jackson, Mississippi, a testament to her inherent ambition, relentless dedication, and exceptional capabilities. With her professional life flourishing, she felt a natural and deeply human inclination towards building a family of her own, a common and universally cherished desire. Her path serendipitously intersected with Richard Mosby through convivial mediation of a mutual friend, Aunt Liz, who also worked with Gail. My mom and dad met when my Aunt Liz, who worked with my mom, introduced them. Richard Mosby, originally hailing from Canton, Mississippi, presented a charming, approachable, and seemingly affable persona. He was referred to as Happy or Smiley. He always had a big smile on his face. His fun-loving, somewhat light-hearted, and generally easygoing nature seemed, at the time, to perfectly complement Gail's more driven, ambitious, and meticulously organized temperament. After a relatively brief courtship, characterized by evident mutual affection and a shared vision of a harmonious family life, they decided to marry, committing to building a future together. My parents were married in 1981. Their loving union soon brought the joyous, often cacophonous, sound of children into their lives, expanding their family and their happiness. They had my brother Bill in 1982, and then I was born in 1985. To the external world, observing their burgeoning family unit, they appear to be genuinely content, deeply happy, and profoundly in love, a couple achieving the quintessential American dream. They appear to be very happy, very much in love. Aunt Gail was happy to finally have found someone. This pervasive sense of fulfillment, of having meticulously achieved the personal and professional milestones she had desired, further powerfully countered the emerging dark narrative of internal despair and self-destruction. To provide for their rapidly growing family, Richard embarked on an entrepreneurial venture, establishing his own tire business in the vibrant city of Hammond, Louisiana. He and Gail subsequently acquired a house there, seemingly settling comfortably into a promising new life filled with shared aspirations, domestic bliss, and the bustling energy of young children. My first memories of life were growing up in Hammond. My dad was a great dad, and my mom was a great mom. I felt loved by both of them. These idyllic early years were imbued with the warmth of familial affection and a reassuring sense of domestic stability, painting a picture-happy, carefree childhood. However, Richard's entrepreneurial ambition, unfortunately, soon encountered unforeseen and formidable obstacles. My father had a family tire business in Canton, Mississippi that was fairly successful, and I think my dad wanted to try to duplicate that, but unfortunately, the business failed. The collapse of the tire business delivered a devastating blow, profoundly impacting their lives not only financially, but also emotionally. Gail, with her characteristic fortitude, immense inner strength, and unwavering dedication, continued to work diligently as a highly successful NICU nurse, thereby providing the primary and often sole income for the family. However, the combined and escalating economic burden of supporting 2 young children and covering mounting rent payments, particularly after cessation of Richard's income, proved to be an overwhelming strain on a single salary. Faced with these undeniable and increasingly harsh financial realities, Gail and Richard made the incredibly difficult and emotionally arduous decision to relocate back to Jackson, Mississippi, hoping to secure a fresh start and more stable employment for Richard. So she and Richard made the difficult decision to move back to Jackson. When they moved back, Richard went back to work, I understand, for the tire company. He was not making the money he had made prior. The diminished income, coupled with the profound psychological weight and emotional strain of a failed business venture, created an environment ripe with marital tension, underlying friction, and mounting stress. There was a lot of stress, the failure of the tire business and the strain economically that it put on my family ended up leading to them divorcing. Yet, even in the deeply personal and often acrimonious dissolution of their marriage, Gail and Richard, to their credit, demonstrated a remarkably commendable maturity, particularly where their children's well-being was concerned. My parents got divorced in 1986, but they still got along great. I mean, it was a happy family still. It's just that they weren't married. Following the divorce, my mom had full custody and my dad had every other weekend. They got along better post-divorce then. They did when they were married. They were very amicable. Such a healthy and functional co-parenting relationship, truly admirable and unfortunately rare in many divorces, eloquently illustrated Gail's enduring dedication to creating a stable, emotionally secure, and loving environment for her children, even in the face of her own profound personal heartache and marital dissolution. 2 years subsequent to their divorce, Richard chose to remarry, embarking on a new marital journey. Gail, however, consciously and deliberately chose a different path, remaining single and unequivocally dedicating herself, heart and soul, to the multifaceted demands and profound joys of motherhood. For her, motherhood was not merely a societal role. It was an all-encompassing identity, a profound life purpose that superseded and outshone any personal romantic aspirations. For her, motherhood came before everything else. My mom's greatest aspiration was to be able to see me and my brother successful and grow up to be the best we could be. Her innate, almost boundless patience, meticulously honed and perfected in the demanding, high-stakes environment of the NICU, extended effortlessly and profoundly to her own beloved sons, a wellspring of calm and understanding. I don't know how my mother could be as patient as she was with me. That's what made my mother such. A great mother is how much I sense that she cared about me. Gail's entire life, when viewed in its rich and complex totality, was an eloquent and compelling narrative of unyielding ambition, profound personal resilience, deep human connection, and an overwhelming, utterly selfless dedication to her children, a constellation of attributes that made the notion of her willingly committing suicide an act utterly inconsistent with the very fabric of her being, a betrayal of everything she fundamentally stood for, fiercely loved and deeply cherished. The journal's confession, a glimmer of personal turmoil, a veil of secrecy torn by envy. 6 arduous and dedicated years had passed since Gail assumed the challenging and profoundly important mantle of a single mother. Years she had devoted unreservedly to nurturing her beloved sons and meticulously constructing a stable, loving home, a sanctuary of peace and growth for them. Now, she was discovered dead in her bathtub, presented initially as an apparent suicide, a narrative that threatened to simplify and tragically misrepresent her complex life. The subsequent discovery of her personal journal at the scene initially offered what many interpreted as a potential, albeit deeply tragic, explanation for such an unimaginable act, providing a glimpse into her emotional struggles. Her journal found at the scene offers a potential reason for why she would end her own life. She had been having some problems with depression at the time. The entry spoke candidly and with raw emotion of a recent, profoundly painful breakup in her life. It describes a very unhappy breakup with a woman she had been having an apparently pretty, long-term relationship with. I never really knew that they were dating at the time, my mom and her girlfriend, but I still remember my mom on the couch after they had broken up, crying and just being very, very affected by this breakup. This vulnerability was real, and it formed a superficial anchor for the suicide theory. To properly and sensitively analyze this crucial element, it is imperative for a criminal psychology analyst to meticulously contextualize Gail's personal experiences within the prevailing social landscape of the early 1990s. In Mississippi in the early 90s, having a homosexual relationship would have been a very troubling thing to do in terms of societal acceptance. That would cause someone to have a hard time expressing their heartache. Mississippi's still a conservative state, and there still is a stigma among certain people, and the climate at that time or relationship would have been defined a lot differently. This enforced secrecy and the agonizing lack of social support for her emotional struggles could unequivocally exacerbate feelings of depression and despair, potentially making an individual feel more acutely vulnerable, deeply alone, and isolated in their profound suffering. Such sustained emotional suppression and social isolation are well documented, powerful factors in deepening and prolonging depressive episodes. However, even with this deeply personal and undeniably influential potential motive, a broken heart compounded by significant and stifling societal pressures, not everyone at the grim scene that fateful day in May of 1992 was, for a moment, genuinely convinced that Gail Mosby chose to end her own life. Even with that potential motive, not everyone on scene that day is convinced that Gail Mosby chose to end her life. There was just something amiss, and it's that old police gut feeling that something was wrong. Everything was just too damn neat. It almost looked staged. There's something we're missing here, and I can't put my finger on it. The puzzle pieces, while individually plausible, refused to fit the picture presented, pointing instead to a darker, hidden image. The clash of authority, a detective's conviction against a coroner's dogma, and the cracking of a frame. The evening of May 24th, 1992, bore down with a heavy, oppressive burden of unresolved questions lingering ominously around perplexing death of single Mother Gail Mosby. Into this fraught and emotionally charged atmosphere stepped Jackson Police Homicide Detective Al Ledoux, a respected and formidable figure, renowned for his keen intellect, razor-sharp wit, and an almost obsessive, unwavering attention to most minute details of a crime scene. Coming up, investigators hear about a personal grudge. She was very nasty towards my Aunt Gail. She did not like her, and an informant agrees to wear a wire. It does establish that they were in the house when Gail died, and they weren't there for honorable purposes. On the night of May 24th, 1992, with several questions lingering about single Mother Gail Mosby's apparent suicide, Jackson Police sent Homicide Detective Al Ledoux to the scene. He was a great detective, and he paid attention to detail. he immediately started working as a murderer. This essential mindset, cultivated over years of confronting grim realities, is crucial in complex cases. It ensures that no possibility, however remote, is prematurely discarded or casually overlooked in the rush to conclude, while diligently acknowledging all potential scenarios, including an accidental overdose or a severe, unexpected reaction to medication. There was a possibility that maybe she took some meds and just had a bad reaction. But, you got to explore all possibilities. His underlying, powerful professional instinct stubbornly whispered of foul play. The paradox that confronted him was stark and deeply unsettling. There was absolutely nothing that would indicate anything was wrong other than there was a dead woman in the bathtub. He and I both just knew there was just something we were missing, but we didn't know what it was, and he was going to find it. His unwavering determination, a quintessential hallmark of truly excellent detective work, would ultimately prove paramount in meticulously unraveling the stubbornly complex knot of deception. Detective Ledoux meticulously conducted a painstaking, systematic sweep of the entire residence, moving with the methodical precision of a predator hunting its prey, observing every surface, every shadow. His initial findings largely aligned with earlier observations by the patrol officer. No overt, discernible signs of forced entry or violent, overt physical struggle were immediately apparent within the living areas. He looked around a lot and did not see anything turn over, no indication anybody had tried to break in a window or the door, but he did happen to notice that. There was a framed picture. The glass was cracked. The more I looked at it, the more I got suspicious of it, and so was the lead detective. He and we just said, there's something wrong. The cracked glass, a subtle yet profoundly significant detail, a guarded secret deliberately withheld from public knowledge, would later become an irrefutable validation of true insider knowledge, proving invaluable in precisely discerning truth from sophisticated deception, an indicator of a struggle that had indeed occurred. Despite these rapidly escalating suspicions among the police officers, the ultimate official determination of the cause, and, even more critically, the precise manner of death, ultimately rested with the county coroner. The respective roles of these two critical authorities are distinct yet interdependent. While the police primarily investigate the crime and its perpetrators, the coroner's singular jurisdiction is to investigate the death itself, providing the medical and legal classification. Investigators look to the coroner to confirm their suspicions. The crime scene's mine. The homicide case is the homicide detective's. But the body belongs to the coroner. As part of his duty, he pronounced her deceased and, looked at the scene, and there was nothing to indicate foul play. There was a small abrasion on her nose, but nothing that indicated that anybody had beaten her into an unconscious state and put her in the bathtub. Based on these cursory observations, and perhaps influenced by the initial presentation of the scene, the lack of overt chaos, and the seemingly straightforward suicide narrative, the coroner, with remarkable swiftness, rendered his ruling. Gale's death was accidental drowning. This ruling, however, struck a profoundly discordant and jarring note, directly clashing with the growing instincts and the rigorous professional suspicions of the patrol officer and the homicide detective present. The experienced patrol officer, whose acute physiological observations had first cast doubt upon the suicide theory, found himself unable to let the medical opinion stand unchallenged, bravely voicing his profound, scientifically informed skepticism. I said, "Really? Can you really drown in this bathtub?" And his word was to me exactly this. He said, "You can if I say you can." And I knew then, okay, this is where it's going to go. He and I got along up until this point. All the years we worked together, but I thought it was a bad judgment call on his part, and he wasn't willing to look at any other options. And for some reason, he dug his heels on this particular case due to the fact that the lead and I both felt that there was something wrong. This intellectual stubbornness, a common human failing that can plague even the most seasoned professionals, became an immediate and formidable obstacle to the rightful administration of justice, threatening to bury the truth under a veneer of official, yet erroneous, legitimacy. Despite the unshakable official ruling, Detective Ledoux and his determined colleagues were far from deterred, their resolve only hardened in the face of such dismissive obstinacy. They understood, with absolute clarity, the critical importance of maintaining an open avenue for future inquiry, thereby ensuring that the investigation did not simply conclude based on a potentially flawed initial judgment. We put on our offense report there was a death pending, and that left the door open for us for further investigation. This subtle but profoundly significant bureaucratic maneuver allowed them to bypass the immediate, legally binding finality of the coroner's ruling, granting them the essential legal and procedural space to continue their relentless pursuit of the truth, even if it explicitly meant directly challenging a fellow official. For the moment, however, the grim realities of their immediate duty persisted. Their next, most heart-wrenching step was to formally inform Gail's immediate family of her death, a devastating pronouncement framed by the official yet contentious determination of apparent suicide. Ex-husband Richard is left the grim task of delivering the news to their children. The shattered innocence, a father's grim task in children's indignant rejection of lies. The most painful and emotionally wrenching task following Gail's sudden and mysterious death fell, with crushing inevitability, upon her ex-husband, Richard. It was his grim duty to deliver the devastating, life-altering news to their two young sons, Joseph and Bill. This moment would prove to be one of profound, unparalleled trauma, an emotional earthquake that would irrevocably alter and scar the landscape of their young, innocent childhoods. He said, "Look, we got to tell you something. Your mom's dead." And I said, "You're joking." Well, then my dad started crying, and then I knew, and I collapsed, and I'll never remember getting up. The vivid, searing memory of physical collapse, a visceral and involuntary manifestation of acute shock, unimaginable sorrow, and the shattering of his world, powerfully illustrated the profound depth of his initial anguish and the indelible, permanent mark it left upon him, a scar etched deep into his nascent consciousness. Even at their tender, impressionable ages, young Joseph and Bill possessed a rudimentary, yet clear, understanding of the abstract concept of suicide. Yet, this somber concept, when it was presented as the explanation for the loss of their vibrant, loving mother, was something they both vehemently, absolutely, and indignantly rejected, an idea so utterly alien to her known character as to be utterly absurd, logically and emotionally untenable. Even at that age, I understood what suicide was. So to have someone tell me that my mom committed suicide was just the most absurd thing that I could think of as investigators contact more of Gail's family about the circumstances of her death. Her loved ones say it's more likely someone did this to her. Their conviction, a silent testament to a mother's worth, demanded more than superficial answers. Whispers of a grudge, the looming shadow of a new, consuming life. As investigators continued their solemn protocol, painstakingly reaching out to more of Gail's grieving family members about the perplexing and troubling circumstances of her death, a consistent, insistent, and undeniably powerful chorus of profound disbelief emerged. Her loved ones did not merely question the suicide theory, expressing vague doubts. They emphatically declared their deeply held belief that someone had actively, intentionally, and malevolently caused her demise. A particularly chilling and profoundly significant piece of information surfaced from Gail's devoted sister, a premonition, a moment of profound fear that Gail herself had expressed just a mere 2 weeks prior to her death. An ominous foreshadowing. 2 weeks prior to her death, Aunt Gail called my mom and was worried that something was going to happen, and she said she didn't. Feel safe. My mom, as a sister, would do. I tried to reassure her. I'm sure everything's going to be fine, but my mom had to go, so she cut the conversation short. And unfortunately, that was the last time she spoke with her. The heartbreaking irony of this last, abbreviated conversation, intended only to soothe and dismiss irrational fear, instead became a searing source of enduring regret, profound guilt, and significantly amplified suspicion. Gail's sister harbored a strong, rapidly growing suspicion that these voiced concerns and this ominous sense of foreboding were directly, inextricably linked to Richard, Gail's ex-husband, and more pointedly to his new, fiercely possessive wife, Deborah. Tension had been steadily and palpably escalating between the two households, an increasingly tangible animosity that had begun to simmer and then boil ever since Deborah and Richard had married 4 years earlier. Her sister suspects Gail's concerns had something to do with Richard and his new wife, Deborah. She says tension has been growing between them since Deborah and Richard got married 4 years ago. After the divorce, Aunt Gail and Uncle Richard, they were very amicable, co-parented very well. After Debbie came into the picture, the parenting dynamic changed a little bit. Deborah, often referred to simply as Debbie by family members, brought with her a complex and deeply shadowed personal history prior to her union with Richard. Debbie was married before she met my dad. She had 2 children. One of them did not survive infancy, and after my dad and Debbie got married, they had a daughter, Sarah. Debbie treated my brother, and I tremendously different than the way she treated Sarah. Debbie and my father's relationship sort of made us a little bit more secondary. It was now this third party that controlled what we were going to be doing. This control, it quickly became apparent, was far from benevolent. It was perceived as capricious, punitive, and frequently arbitrary, particularly in its negative application towards them, specifically as Gail's children. The previously amicable relationship between Gail and Richard, once a model of responsible and harmonious co-parenting, devolved rapidly and acrimoniously into a series of contentious legal skirmishes, endless battles waged in court, a stark and profoundly bitter contrast to their earlier cooperation and mutual respect. All of a sudden, my mom and my dad, they started having custody battles. They're in and out of court. There's alimony disputes, and it was clear that Debbie was the one spearheading those problems. Gail's family consistently and vehemently identified Deborah's insidious, manipulative influence as the primary driver behind these escalating and draining conflicts, purposefully injecting an unprecedented level of animosity and bitterness where genuine cooperation and mutual respect had once quietly flourished. Gail's family tells police that Deborah resented any reminders of Richard's life before her. She didn't even like the fact that my Aunt Gail didn't change her last name post-divorce. Aunt Gail simply stated it was because that was her boy's last name, but I know it very much was a problem for Debbie. For Deborah, Gail's continued use of the Mosby name represented an unresolved thread, a persistent, annoying, and deeply resented challenge to her carefully constructed narrative of a new, perfect, and exclusively devoted family unit, where she, Deborah, held undisputed dominion. From a meticulous criminal psychological perspective, this type of obsessive control, pathological resentment, and the need for total erasure of a predecessor often characterize individuals with a profoundly fragile ego, deep insecurities, and overriding pathological need for absolute dominance and unchallengeable authority within their immediate social and domestic sphere. Deborah, by all accounts, seemed constitutionally incapable of tolerating any perceived threat or competition, however minor, however symbolic, to her perceived station or control. The stark emotional climate within the two respective households, as acutely experienced and eloquently described by Gail's sons, painted an extraordinarily stark and telling psychological picture. There couldn't be a more striking difference living with my dad and Debbie versus living with my mom. My mom was loving. Living with my dad and Debbie, It was like a complete absence of love. Debbie was very nasty towards my Aunt Gail. It was very evident that she did not like her. Her utility's been cut off. She had no proof who it was. But we all assumed, Gail and me in the police department, that it was coming from Debbie. These repeated, vexatious acts bespoke a personality driven by pervasive spite, a compulsive, almost pathological desire to cause misery, instability, and profound unhappiness in Gail's life, a psychological precursor to the ultimate act of physical violence. Investigators further gleaned a crucial and deeply saddening piece of information that directly connected Deborah's relentless campaign of harassment to Gail's emotional turmoil, the incessant pressure, psychological manipulation, and corrosive drama originating directly from Deborah had been a highly significant contributing factor to Gail's recent breakup, the very heartbreak documented with such raw emotion in her private journal. And investigators learned the situation had been a contributing factor to Gail's recent breakup. Whatever relationship that Gail had with the woman that ended because of all the drama that was involved in it, the corrosive, destructive influence of Deborah's actions was thus not merely confined to the legal and emotional battles over child custody and alimony. It insidiously infiltrated and actively sabotaged Gail's sincere attempts to forge new, healthy, and emotionally fulfilling personal relationships, robbing her of a chance of happiness. This consistent and pervasive pattern strongly suggested an individual utterly bent on isolating Gail, meticulously dismantling her life piece by agonizing peace. An escalating act of profound psychological torment that tragically preceded the ultimate physical act of violence. The demonstrated depth of this pervasive animosity and its destructive, far-reaching impact was clearly and chillingly evident to the investigators, powerfully shifting the primary focus of the nascent investigation firmly toward a malevolent third party and away from the convenient narrative of suicide. However, despite these compelling and numerous anecdotal accounts from Gail's profoundly grieving loved ones, and the rapidly growing, pervasive suspicion among experienced investigators, law enforcement faced a daunting, formidable, and immediate legal challenge. But without evidence to support the idea of murder, there is little investigators can do in the absence of some information that indicated death by another identifiable person. There just wasn't anywhere to go with it, and so nothing really happened until the fall. The protracted passage of 4 long months, however, would only intensify the family's deep-seated conviction, allowing the subtle seeds of suspicion sown by the vigilant officer to germinate and eventually blossom into a revelation so profound and so startling that it would unequivocally shatter the official, deceptive narrative once and for all. The terrified informant, a crack in the wall of silence, a glimmer of shocking truth. For agonizing and fruitless months after Gail Mosby's sudden and perplexing death, as the leaves began their inevitable transformation from vibrant green to the deep, fiery hues of autumn, a pivotal and entirely unexpected moment arrived. This single event would irrevocably alter the entire trajectory of the dormant investigation, injecting it with a surge of life and purpose. A woman, later identified by investigators as Vicky Mordecai, sought refuge and urgent protection at the local office of the Federal Bureau of Investigation, arriving unannounced on a quiet Sunday afternoon, radiating an almost palpable, bone-deep terror. In September, a woman who we now know as Vicky Mordecai went to the office of the FBI on a Sunday afternoon, and she was terrified, and what she said changed the investigation. 4 months after the death of Gail, Mosby, a woman approaches the FBI seeking protection in exchange for information about the case. Vicky Mordecai's intricate, deeply unsettling tale began not with murder, but with a clandestine and illicit criminal operation, one that highlighted her own entanglement in a dangerous world. What Vicky Mordecai tells this FBI agent was that she and her husband, a guy named Ricky Mordecai, were in the business of raising marijuana up in northeast Mississippi, and that an entire crop had disappeared. They were in business with her stepfather, Roy Kyle. Roy Kyle was accusing them of having stolen the crop. This accusation, far from being a simple dispute, had rapidly escalated into a terrifying, unambiguous threat of ultimate retribution. She told them that her stepfather, she felt, was going to hire a hitman to kill her and her husband, and that she was terrified because she knew that he had hired a hitman to kill someone else previously. This precedent, a cold-blooded act of contract killing in the not-so-distant past, rendered her current, desperate fear profoundly credible and chillingly plausible. It was at this critical juncture, fueled by her desperate need for self-preservation, that Vicky Mordecai dropped a bombshell directly pertinent to the dormant Jackson case. She began, haltingly at first, to describe this previous murder, a specific crime whose intimate and corroborating details had been meticulously, even ruthlessly, kept from public disclosure by the diligent investigators, a tightly guarded secret. A woman in Jackson, Gail Mosby, she began to describe the scenario. This woman in the bathtub. They went over to this woman's house and, killed her, she said. In the course of it, something glass got broken. The cracked picture frame, a subtle but persistent anomaly that Detective Ledoux had painstakingly observed at the scene, was now verbally manifested by a terrified informant. The FBI agent, initially encountering Vicky's sensational and almost unbelievable narrative, quite rightly approached it with a necessary degree of skepticism and professional caution. Given the fantastical nature of such claims and the informant's known involvement in criminal activities, he looks at this set of circumstances and says, well, I don't know. This is a little too crazy. But he called the Jackson Police Department, Homicide and Robbery Division. When Jackson homicide detectives hear about the broken glass, they immediately know Vicky is telling the truth because that detail was never made public. So the detective said, I want to talk to her. Vicky Mordecai subsequently came forward, her terror still evident, but her resolve strengthened by the promise of protection, recounting her astonishing and convoluted story in intricate detail to the Jackson police with unwavering conviction and chilling precision. So she came over there and, told him the story, and he says, from whom did you get this information? She told him that she had heard this from her sister, Debbie Mosby. According to Vicky, her and Debbie's stepfather, Roy Kyle, was only the middleman. Deborah said, I need somebody to take care of Gail. Can you help me with it? He said, well, yeah. And its threads led directly to the woman who seemed to embody pure spite. Vicky then proceeded to meticulously detail the alleged sequence of events surrounding Gail's brutal murder, information she had acquired, piece by chilling piece, directly from Deborah. What Vicky says that Deborah Mosby told her was that Billy Ray Ford, this hitman, had come over to their home. They lived in Canton, picked up her husband, Richard Mosby, and they drove over to Gail's house. There was no sign of any forced entry, because Gail thought she was only letting Richard in, and she didn't know Billy Ray was hiding behind the door. Vicky says once the door was open, Billy Ray attacked Gail, and in the ensuing struggle, the picture frame shattered. The meticulously planned method of incapacitation, cold and deliberately brutal, was also starkly revealed. The murderer had covered her mouth and nose with a rag, soaked with something until she was unconscious, and then he had taken her to the bathtub, poured the water until it got high enough, and it drowned her. This gruesome and deeply disturbing narrative not only provided a horrifying, step-by-step sequence of events, but also unequivocally corroborated the police's early, intuitive instincts regarding the deliberate, homicidal nature of the drowning, definitively debunking the suicide theory, the coroner's initial ruling of accidental death, viewed through the irrefutable lens of Vicky's direct testimony, now appeared dangerously misguided, woefully insufficient, and profoundly wrong. Investigators, seizing upon these profound and explosive revelations, immediately initiated a comprehensive and urgent background check on the alleged hitman, Billy Ray Ford. His criminal record, rapidly retrieved, provided immediate and overwhelming validation, unequivocally revealing a long and brutal history of violence, painting a clear picture of a man entirely capable of orchestrating and executing such a heinous act. When investigators run a background check on the alleged hitman, Billy Ray Ford, they find a history of violence, including a past conviction for the attempted murder of a sheriff in Warren County, Mississippi. It was reversed on appeal, so that was not a viable conviction to use against him. But, he was a known criminal element out there. Armed with this crucial, validated knowledge, detectives swiftly issued a beyond the lookout for Ford, and, with a renewed and targeted focus, immediately redirected their full investigative attention and resources squarely to Deborah Mosby, who is now exposed as a cruel architect of the plot. Deborah's documented, deep-seated, and almost pathological animosity towards Gail, previously contextualized and unfortunately dismissed as mere trivial domestic squabbling, now took on a much darker, far more sinister and profoundly malevolent hue. We knew she was harassing Gail to the point of utter absurdity just to get her to back off, collecting the child support that she was certainly entitled to. Deborah's history with Gail adds credence to Vicky's allegations and gives Jackson police enough to open an official investigation. We believe at that point that Gail did not commit suicide. That did not happen. So we've got to do something about this. The painstaking, diligent, and utterly dedicated hunt for true justice, now clearly defined and resolutely targeted, had officially and irrevocably commenced, fueled by the relentless pursuit of truth. The invisible recorder, a tapestry of deceit woven with electronic threads and evasive words. With Richard and Deborah Mosby now unequivocally identified as the primary suspects, the cruel perpetrators, in the callous murder of his ex-wife, Gail, the prosecution team led by Tommy, understood instinctively that mere suspicion, or even the compelling, albeit indirectly obtained, testimony of a terrified informant, was not going to be enough to secure an ironclad conviction in a demanding court of law. Legal rigor, especially in a capital murder case, mandated more direct, corroborating evidence, something irrefutable and concrete that could speak for itself. With shrewd strategic foresight and meticulous planning, detectives cautiously approached Ricky and Vicky Mordecai, the very individuals who had courageously broken the case wide open, with a delicate and profoundly critical request to wear a hidden recording device, colloquially known as a wire, and venture back into the lion's den. Coming up, a history of tragedies raises even more questions. Couldn't get past the idea that we're talking about two people who drown in a bathtub. It sure is unusual, and investigators face a political battle to prove their case. She was buried without an autopsy, so we get an order to have Gail's body exhumed. Richard and Deborah Mosby have emerged as the primary suspects in his ex-wife's murder, but for now, the only evidence detectives have comes from a confessed marijuana farmer. With more direct evidence needed, detectives ask both Ricky and Vicky Mordecai to wear a wire. Ricky and Vicky get wired up. They go up to Richard and Deborah's house. Their ingenious pretext for this perilous covert visit was meticulously crafted around their very real, desperate fear, a fear that, with chilling irony, was directly linked to the very murder they were helping to expose. Ricky and Vicky are still thinking that Billy Ray Ford has a contract to kill them, so they go there to talk to Deborah and Richard about how terrified they are, and can Deborah intervene and keep this pit man from coming kill them just as he did Gail. This ingeniously constructed ruse allowed them to approach the suspects under a guise of shared vulnerability and a plea for desperate intervention, a tactic designed to maximize the chances that Richard and Deborah would speak candidly, or at least evasively enough to reveal crucial details. The wires hummed, silently capturing every strained breath, every loaded pause, every damning word. with investigators listening in from a remote, secure location, their ears acutely tuned to every syllable, every inflection, and every pregnant pause transmitted by the hidden wires. Deborah Mosby began to make admissions, while she meticulously avoided uttering a direct, explicit confession of murder. Her words and her carefully chosen omissions were nonetheless profoundly incriminating, painting a vivid picture of her underlying intent. She openly acknowledged her familiarity with Billy Ray Ford, but steadfastly denied issuing a direct, unambiguous command for murder. With investigators listening in, Deborah admits knowing Billy Ray, but denies hiring him to kill anyone. What Deborah was talking about was not that she hired him to murder her. She hired him to go over there and scare her, or rough her up, or, just make her go away. The language is not the smoking gun we want, but it's helpful. It was a powerful, chilling indicator of her deep-seated animosity, her manipulative nature, and her profound ability to cloak murderous intent in seemingly softer, more palatable words. Crucially, the wiretap operation yielded something even more significant than a partial or semi-confession. It provided an indirect, yet legally solid, admission that firmly established the physical presence of the key players, the alleged perpetrators, at the very scene of the crime, during the critical time frame of Gail's death. It does in fact establish that Billy Ray Ford and Richard Mosby were in the house when Gail died. This was an absolutely pivotal piece of electronically gathered evidence, irrefutably placing both Richard, Gail's ex-husband, and the alleged hitman Billy Ray Ford inside Gail's residence at the time of her demise. Their presence, combined with Deborah's carefully phrased but damning statements captured on the wire, began to paint a far clearer, far more sinister picture of collusion, calculated deception, and unmistakable foul play. The initial narrative of Gail's suicide was now not merely disputed or questioned. It was actively, demonstrably being dismantled, brick by meticulous brick, through these hidden, impartial recordings. The silence of the house had spoken, captured by technology, revealing the true nature of its deadly encounter. Digital breadcrumbs, the network of calls that unmasked the conspiracy. Following the successful execution of the delicate sting operation, law enforcement, with renewed purpose and definitive direction, swiftly issued a subpoena for Deborah Mosby's phone records, a routine yet powerful investigative procedure that, in modern criminal cases, often unearths intricate and highly revealing networks of communication that expose the hidden machinations of conspiracies. The resulting trove of call logs proved to be a damning and intricately woven mosaic of digital evidence, a meticulously detailed breadcrumb trail leading directly to the dark heart of the conspiracy to murder. After the sting operation, police subpoenaed Deborah's phone records. About a month prior to Gail's death, one night Deborah Mosby calls her stepfather, who happens to have connections with a hitman. Roy calls Billy Ray Ford, who in turn calls Deborah, and then Deborah calls him back. The meticulously time-stamped and precisely cataloged call records revealed an escalating and highly suspicious frequency of communication between parties who, prior to this precise point, were complete strangers to one another, sharing no legitimate social or business ties. To our knowledge, Deborah had never known Billy Ray Ford before she was put in touch with him by Roy Carr. Call logs show that in the month leading up to Gail's death, Deborah and Billy Ray spoke several times. The sudden, repeated, and demonstrably intense communication between two individuals who, ostensibly, shared no prior relationship, no legitimate acquaintance, or no innocent connection, spoke volumes more eloquently and damningly than any direct confession. These people don't know each other from Adam's house, but they're having all these conversations. It looked pretty bad, smelled pretty bad, but did we really have it? Not so sure. So we indicted them for conspiracy to commit murder. The meticulous groundwork painstakingly laid by the investigators had paid off. weaving together what initially appeared to be disparate and unrelated threads into an unbreakable rope of legal accountability that would bind the conspirators. The unmasking and the children's renewed nightmare, living with shadows. The authorities, now armed with a truly formidable and meticulously constructed array of compelling evidence, moved swiftly, decisively, and with unwavering confidence. Richard, Deborah, and Billy Ray Ford were apprehended and subsequently arrested without incident, marking a dramatic and publicly astonishing conclusion to months of painstaking, often covert, investigative work. The bizarre, cold-blooded, and shockingly intricate murder plot, previously veiled in secrecy and suspicion, immediately seized headlines throughout the entire region, captivating the stunned attention of a public aghast at the unfolding drama of domestic betrayal and calculated violence. Authorities arrest Richard, Deborah, and Billy Ray without incident. The bizarre murder plot captures headlines throughout the region. For Gail's children, young Joseph and Bill, the arrest brought a profoundly complex and agonizing mix of validation and a renewed, almost unbearable wave of profound pain, forcing them to confront horrifying truths. The previous, insidious attempts by their father and stepmother to manipulate their young, impressionable minds, to cynically deflect blame onto their loving, protective maternal family, portraying them as malicious antagonists, were now unequivocally exposed as calculated, cruel, and utterly cynical falsehoods, revealing the depths of the perpetrator's depravity. My father and Debbie, they were trying to tell us that it was my grandparents and my aunts, and they were out to get us. There's no truth to it. For young Joseph, the raw news of his stepmother, Deborah's, arrest provided a profoundly disturbing, yet strangely cathartic, sense of alignment with his long-held, unspoken suspicions. Whenever I found out that Debbie was also arrested, my initial thoughts were, this sort of makes sense. His young, intuitive understanding of her palpable animosity and cold indifference towards his beloved mother, now seemingly validated by the gravity and severity of the criminal charges, confirmed his darkest, most terrifying and once dismissed fears. It offered a grim, bitter clarity amidst the swirling emotional confusion. However, the subsequent, shocking arrest of his own father, Richard, delivered a different, far more agonizing and emotionally crippling blow, fundamentally shattering the remaining, fragile fragments of a cherished childhood image, twisting it into something unrecognizable and horrific. I didn't think that my dad would have done something like that. That wasn't who he was. The cherished image of his once happy or smiley father, the great dad from his earliest, most innocent memories, clashed violently, irreconcilably, and profoundly with the horrifying, undeniable reality of a man now undeniably implicated in a cold-blooded murder conspiracy. The psychological trauma of such a revelation, the catastrophic shattering of a child's fundamental perception of a parent's unconditional love and protective presence, is an existential blow, leaving deep and pervasive scars that can and often do last a lifetime. The ground beneath their feet had once again shifted with cataclysmic force, but this time, the seismic shock revealed a horrifying, concrete truth rather than a tragically mislabeled accident. The shadows had come home to roost. Echoes of a dark past, a chilling repetition of tragedy, a psychological signature. The momentous news of Deborah Mosby's arrest for conspiracy to commit murder resonated far beyond the immediate confines of Jackson, Mississippi, traveling through invisible yet potent social channels to reach individuals from her earlier, veiled life who held chillingly relevant information. News of the arrest also reaches someone from Deborah's past, Deborah's ex-husband, who's a guy named Mike McLean. He contacted me and told me some just horrendous things about her. The analyst's antennae twitched, repeated patterns of behavior, particularly when concerning violence or disregard for life, are critical indicators in criminal psychology. Mike McLean's chilling account focused on a profoundly tragic and deeply unsettling event that had occurred in May 1988, Several years prior to his divorce from Deborah, they had 2 children together at the time of this earlier tragedy. Mike tells authorities about a tragedy that occurred in May 1988 before his divorce from Deborah. They had a child named Angel, and Angel was wheelchair-bound. And then they had another small child. Mike told me that the wheelchair-bound child was supposed to be watching the child in the bathtub, and the child drowned. The striking and undeniable parallels between the 2 tragic events, a domestic setting, the presence of a bathtub, and the untimely, premature drowning of a dependent, were too stark, too chillingly consistent, to be casually dismissed as mere unfortunate coincidence. It immediately begged for a deeper psychological investigation. What rendered Mike McClain's testimony even more deeply disturbing, particularly when viewed through the exacting lens of criminal psychology, was Deborah's alleged reaction and her immediate, shockingly callous attempt to deflect blame. Mike said that Deborah tried to blame the wheelchair-bound child for the negligence that caused that child to die. The specific, grotesque detail was profoundly revealing, painting a chilling and unmistakable portrait of a woman utterly devoid of genuine empathy, quick to manipulate facts, and disturbingly eager to assign blame, even to an entirely innocent and vulnerable child, in a desperate, transparent, and profoundly self-serving attempt to escape personal responsibility for a monumental tragedy that occurred under her direct or delegated care. The calculated cruelty inherent in deflecting such a monumental burden of blame and guilt onto a disabled child spoke chillingly volumes about her twisted psychological makeup and her pathological, overriding need to avoid accountability at any cost. This evasion of responsibility is a recurring, dominant trait in many psychopathic and sociopathic personalities, forming a core part of their psychological signature. Prosecutors, presented with this profoundly disturbing and highly corroborative revelation, immediately recognized the overwhelming, premonitory significance of the undeniable similarities between the 2 incidents. Prosecutors can't ignore the similarities between the 2 incidents. You couldn't get past the idea that we're talking about 2 people who drown in a bathtub. It just kind of takes your breath away, doesn't it? Nobody ever could prove anything about that. But it sure is unusual. While there was no concrete legal proof to definitively link Deborah to the child's drowning as a criminal act, no conviction to parallel Gail's case, the eerie repetition of specific elements, the consistent pattern of her manipulative behavior, the shocking callousness displayed in her reaction, and the chilling recurrence of such profound tragic events, all cumulatively added a profound, unsettling, and ultimately damning layer of psychological suspicion to the ongoing capital murder investigation into Gail Mosby's death. It strongly, unequivocally suggested a deeply disturbed and dangerously calculating individual, perfectly capable of manipulating circumstances, exploiting vulnerabilities, and deflecting profound responsibility in the face of monumental tragedy. A consistent psychological signature of someone willing to let others bear the unbearable consequences of her own malevolent negligence or even deliberate action. Even with this new, profoundly suspicious discovery, which provided a chilling and stark psychological profile of Deborah Mosby and her patterns of behavior, prosecutors remained keenly aware of the arduous and challenging legal path that lay ahead in securing an ironclad conviction for Gail's murder. The burden of proof in the American criminal justice system, rightfully so, is exceptionally high, demanding an undeniable standard of proof beyond a reasonable doubt for every element of the crime. Even with this new suspicious discovery, prosecutors aren't sure there's enough to get a conviction. What you have to have in order to convict someone is proof beyond a reasonable doubt. We weren't there yet. The district attorney's office understood with absolute clarity that they needed to continue, relentlessly building an unassailable, meticulously documented case, gathering every conceivable and admissible piece of evidence to effectively counter potential defense arguments and ultimately convince a jury beyond any lingering shadow of a doubt The cruelty of injustice, custody to suspects, and the arduous fight for exhumation. As the district attorney's office continued its diligent and methodical work to strengthen the capital murder case against Richard and Deborah Mosby, an alarmingly unjust and deeply distressing development occurred, exacerbating the already profound emotional torment of Gail's remaining family. The court's baffling and profoundly unsettling decision to release Richard and Deborah on bail, particularly in a case involving an alleged murder conspiracy, was met with incredulity, outrage, and visceral horror by the grieving children and their maternal grandparents. The DA's office continues to build its case, but their urgency increases when Richard and Deborah are released on bail. They had custody of the little boy. I've never known that to happen. The judicial decision, in a profoundly bewildering turn, inexplicably placed young Bill and Joseph, the beloved sons of the brutally murdered Gail and her allegedly complicit ex-husband Richard, directly under the legal care of Richard and Deborah, their mother's accused murderers. This was not merely an act of profound injustice. It was a cruel, almost theatrical, irony that forced the victims' traumatized children to reside under the same roof as the individuals, believed to be directly responsible for their mother's violent death. The psychological impact of such a placement is unimaginable for developing minds. For young Joseph, this mandated placement was nothing short of a living nightmare made terrifyingly real, a shocking reversal of the safety, emotional warmth, and normalcy he had just begun, tentatively, to find in his grandparent home. Richard being the natural father, they went to live with Richard and Debbie, completely believing that Debbie had killed my mom. Now I'm living with her. I know that my life's probably in danger, too. This acute, existential dread speaks volumes about Deborah's terrifying persona, her manipulative influence over Richard, and the deep-seated fear she actively inspired, even in innocent children who instinctively recognized danger. Gail's parents, Frank and Jackie, seeing the devastating emotional and undoubtedly psychological toll this placement was taking on their grandsons, fought with fierce, unwavering determination and every ounce of their being to extract them from this manifestly dangerous and abusive environment. Nearly 8 months after Gail Mosby was found dead in her bathtub, the two prime suspects in her murder, her ex-husband Richard and his new wife Deborah, have been released on bail. They've also retained custody of Gail and Richard's 2 sons, Joe and Bill. My grandparents knew that Bill and Joe were being mistreated when they were in Richard and Deb's care, and they were doing everything they could to get custody of them. Gail's parents ultimately prevail in the custody battle. This hard-won victory, though purchased at immense emotional cost, provided a desperately needed sanctuary, a haven of security and unconditional love, finally allowing the traumatized boys to begin the slow, arduous, and immensely courageous process of healing from the double trauma of loss and betrayal. We moved to Baton Rouge and started to live with my grandparents, which was just life-changing because now it's the first time that we've had some sense of normalcy. Since my mom was killed, this profound act of familial love, protection, and uncompromising ethical conduct stood as an eloquent testament to the enduring power of familial bonds, a resilience that even the darkest and most calculated evil could not ultimately sever. Meanwhile, the prosecution team continued to grapple with a significant and politically charged administrative roadblock: the steadfast and unyielding refusal of the county coroner to reverse his initial erroneous ruling that Gail's death was a suicide, despite the burgeoning, compelling, and ever-growing evidence unequivocally pointing towards homicide. This singular official declaration, stemming directly from his initial assessment, became an immovable and immensely frustrating barrier, an exercise in administrative stubbornness that directly and dangerously impeded the relentless pursuit of genuine justice. The prosecution, however, is still facing a major roadblock. Despite the evidence collected, the county coroner will not reverse his ruling that Gail's death was a suicide. We knew that the Cause of death was drowning, but we didn't have conclusive proof that the manner of death was homicide. She was buried without an autopsy. An autopsy, a detailed and meticulous forensic examination of the body, is an indispensable tool in suspicious death investigations, often providing crucial physical evidence, biological samples, and definitive clarity on the precise cause and, most importantly, the manner of death. Without this initial examination, critical forensic opportunities for evidence collection and scientific analysis were irrevocably lost in the immediate aftermath of Gail's death. Recognizing this profound and glaring deficit, and understanding its implications for a capital murder trial, the prosecution grasped that to definitively prove homicide beyond a reasonable doubt, they had only one recourse, however difficult and emotionally fraught: the process of exhuming Gail's body from its resting place. One of the next things that we did was to get an order to have Gail's body exhumed and do an autopsy. The exhumation, a deeply solemn, highly sensitive, and meticulously orchestrated procedure, was ultimately undertaken with a specific and urgent forensic goal: to search for any chemical residue, particularly sedative or incapacitating agents, that might definitively confirm Vicky Mordecai's testimony regarding Gail's chemical incapacitation prior to the drowning. One thing that we wanted to know was whether or not we could prove that she had chloroform in her system, but that was not successful. We couldn't prove or disprove that because the body was too decomposed. While this outcome represented a regrettable setback, eliminating a potentially vital and definitive piece of chemical evidence, it did not entirely derail or halt the investigation. The prosecution's unwavering resolve remained unbroken, realizing that while direct chemical proof was now tragically elusive, other astute forensic interpretations of the physical evidence could still unequivocally validate their theory of deliberate, cold-blooded homicide, providing the missing scientific pillar to their legal argument. The truth would emerge, even if the preferred pathway was blocked. The expert's eye, unveiling the unseen truth through forensic genius. Facing the dual and formidable challenges of an intransigent and uncooperative local coroner, stubbornly clinging to an erroneous initial ruling, and the harsh forensic limitations imposed by the natural processes of decomposition, the prosecution team, with admirable strategic foresight, wisely turned to an undisputed and internationally recognized authority in the highly specialized field of forensic pathology. The only way we were going to get this case is to call an outside pathologist, my office-hired DR, Michael Biden, who was a premier forensic pathologist in the country. Dr. Biden, a luminary whose sterling reputation, vast experience, and extraordinary insights preceded him, brought to the increasingly complex case an unparalleled wealth of knowledge, decades of experience, and a remarkable, almost preternatural capacity for meticulous observation, incisive critical thinking, and unflinching deductive reasoning. His presence alone signaled a new, decisive phase of the investigation. The lead investigator, a detective whose own profound instincts had consistently and stubbornly pointed to foul play rather than suicide, meticulously presented Dr. Biden with the entire complex narrative of Gail's death, recounting every known detail, every witness statement, and every agonizing unanswered question gathered over preceding months. I tell him this whole story, and it was like he knew exactly where I needed to go. He said, "Go get your autopsy pictures." And so I did. Upon receiving and meticulously reviewing the grim, yet forensically invaluable images captured at the crime scene during the initial investigation, his focus was immediate, precise, and unerring, a laser-like concentration on specific, telling anomalies, and immediately he just zones in on this little bruise on her ankle. This seemingly minor bruise, initially cataloged but then, unfortunately, dismissed as inconsequential or accidental in the rushing confusion of the initial investigation, now took on a profound, chilling significance under Dr. Biden's scrutinizing and expert gaze. It was a silent witness, a tiny yet eloquent piece of evidence, patiently waiting for the right interpreter to understand its hidden story. Dr. Biden's meticulous analysis transcended mere superficial observation. It was a brilliant, scientifically grounded forensic reconstruction of the tragic events, meticulously based on established physiological and pathological principles. He knew exactly what had happened, but he said, once you're unconscious, then you're not struggling anymore. They could take her unconscious body and pick her up by her ankles, place her in a body of water, and all they had to do was to get the water level over her nose. This chillingly efficient and highly deliberate method of drowning an already incapacitated, unconscious individual was entirely consistent with all the physical evidence. The perplexingly shallow water in the tub, the curious absence of struggle marks often associated with active drowning, and the distinct forensic nature of the drowning itself. It ingeniously transformed the scene's apparent simplicity and neatness from an indicator of suicide into a stark and undeniable signature of sophisticated, calculated, and cold-blooded murder. The puzzle pieces, once scattered and seemingly contradictory, now clicked into a terrifyingly clear picture of homicide. Furthermore, Dr. Biden noticed another subtle, yet absolutely critical detail meticulously revealed in the original autopsy pictures. Specific, discernible abrasions on Gail's delicate nose. Dr. Biden noticed abrasions on her nose, which is consistent with a rough cloth like a towel being held over her nose. It was used to make her unconscious, this minute, yet profoundly significant. Forensic observation perfectly and powerfully corroborated Vicky Mordecai's earlier testimony about Gail being precisely incapacitated with a rag soaked with something over her mouth and nose, confirming the use of a chemical agent or forceful suppression. The physical evidence, meticulously interpreted by a leading and globally respected expert, aligned with astounding and undeniable precision with the informant's account, creating an absolutely cohesive, unshakable, and undeniable narrative of premeditated murder. The ultimate conclusion, articulated by Dr. Biden, presented with the full weight of his scientific authority, was unequivocal, forceful, and deeply resonant, serving as a profound validation. It eloquently echoed the powerful, intuitive instincts of the experienced patrol officer who had first questioned the suicide narrative. At the crime scene, Dr. Biden said, "This is not suicide. This is not an accident. This is a homicide." He made the same statement I did. You can't commit suicide in shallow water. This expert testimony, rigorously rooted in unassailable scientific principles, decades of extensive professional experience, and an acute attention to often missed details, was a decisive, crushing, and utterly irrefutable blow against the county coroner's persistent, ego-driven, and tragically flawed initial ruling. The scientific truth, spoken with clarity, now stood in stark contrast to institutional obstinacy. Despite Dr. Biden's unassailable findings and the undeniable clarity of his expert opinion, the local coroner, with astonishing and perplexing stubbornness, remained unyielding in his initial position. It didn't change the coroner's mind. He took the position that it was still a suicide and continued. To do that, he took the position that he was a coroner and that was the gospel, and there was no getting around it. To me, the victim was way more important than his ego. The prosecution now unequivocally possessed the irrefutable scientific evidence they required, and their unwavering hope rested firmly on Dr. Biden's powerful expert opinion being potent enough, compelling enough, and undeniable enough to sway a jury, ultimately overcoming the local coroner's continuing, and by now, almost laughably isolated, dissent. Prosecutors hope that Dr. Biden's expert opinion will be enough to convince a jury. The truth, meticulously uncovered through perseverance and brilliance, was finally ready for its long-awaited and desperately needed day in court. The long road to justice, trials, pleas, and the unraveling of deceit. On October 10th, 1994, more than 2.5 agonizing years after Gail Mosby was brutally found dead in her bathtub. The wheels of justice, though slow and arduous, finally began their inexorable turn. The joint trial of Deborah Mosby, Richard Mosby, and Billy Ray Ford commenced, a culmination of tireless, often clandestine investigative work, unshakable perseverance, and an unwavering, almost spiritual, determination to uncover the truth. On October 10th, 1994, the joint trial of Deborah Mosby, Richard Mosby, and Billy Ray Ford begins. Tommy and I decided that we would try the conspiracy to commit capital murder first. This methodical approach aimed to demonstrate premeditation and a shared criminal enterprise. As the state systematically presented its formidable body of evidence for the conspiracy, charges, which included the meticulously detailed phone records, the terrifying yet brave informant testimony, the chilling and independently gathered wiretap recordings, and Dr. Biden's powerful forensic reconstruction, the psychological pressure on the defendants became immense, almost unbearable, under the overwhelming and undeniable weight of the rapidly accumulating and interlocking facts. One of the accused, facing the bleak and terrifying prospect of severe and life-altering consequences, made a profound and pivotal decision. He decided to turn against the others, to confess and implicate his co-conspirators. As the state lays out its evidence for the conspiracy charges, one of the defendants decides to turn against the others. It's not looking good to Billy Ray. So his lawyer comes over to the counsel table and says, "My client wants a deal, and he will agree to testify against Richard and Debbie," which is golden. This was a decisive, long-awaited breakthrough that prosecutors had painstakingly worked towards, strategically maneuvering to achieve. An insider, a direct, intimate participant in the very act of murder, now willing to fully, unequivocally, and unvarnishedly expose the complete, intricate truth of the entire conspiracy. Such a confession, coming from within the criminal circle itself, is the undeniable holy grail of prosecutorial efforts, an unparalleled opportunity to dismantle the defense's narrative with an eyewitness account. Ford's statement, delivered with the stark gravitas of a man confessing to the ultimate crime, from a witness stand, served as the ultimate, definitive unmasking. It unequivocally settled, once and for all, the long-standing question of who truly masterminded Gale's brutal murder. His chilling, detailed testimony left no lingering room for doubt about the hierarchy of malevolence within the conspiracy. Ford's statement settles once and for all who the mastermind behind the murder really was. He actually dealt with Deborah, who retained him, and she was the one he was talking to. Richard apparently pretty much did what Deborah told him to do. It's the break prosecutors have been looking for. Now, they just have to convince a jury. This was a case that had a lot of moving parts. The state never knows if there's going to be one person who just doesn't believe they proved their case. With Billy Ray Ford now firmly secured as a cooperating state's witness, agreeing to bravely testify against Deborah and Richard Mosby, the couple's cases were strategically and legally severed. They would now face separate, individual trials for capital murder, a crucial prosecutorial maneuver that allowed for a more focused, precise, and targeted presentation of evidence specifically against each defendant's distinct role and specific culpability. With Billy Ray Ford agreeing to testify against Deborah and Richard Mosby, the couple's cases are severed. They will be tried separately for capital murder. In May 1995, the judicial proceedings against Richard Mosby officially commenced. Faced with the overwhelming and undeniable body of evidence, which included the chilling, first-hand testimony of the man he himself had explicitly ushered into Gale's home to commit murder, Richard, confronted by the inescapable truth, made a momentous and legally significant decision. In May 1995, the proceedings against Richard began. Richard decided to plead guilty to murder, so of course the death penalty was off the table at that point. It was a confusing time emotionally because as hateful and as angry as I was, the sense of relief was just overbearing. It was very important to know that he pleaded guilty. His admission, though agonizing and psychologically devastating for his children, brought a clear, albeit tragic and permanent, answer to a haunting, pervasive question that had tormented their young lives for years. With Richard's guilty plea for murder firmly secured, prosecutors then turned their full, unwavering, and laser-like attention to the woman they conclusively believed was the true, malicious architect of the entire crime, the malevolent, driving force behind the entire horrific plot. Prosecutors then turned their attention to the woman they believe orchestrated the crime. The mastermind is Deborah Mosby, and we know her to be, however you define it, evil. Debbie was a catalyst of this whole thing. Her actions were not the result of impulsive rage. They were meticulously planned, deeply vindictive, consistently sustained, and utterly devoid of genuine human remorse or empathy. Deborah's capital murder trial officially began in December 1995, more than 3 grueling and agonizing years after Gail's life was brutally extinguished. The prosecution's case was built on an unassailable foundation of compelling and interconnected evidence, buttressed by 2 critical, stellar witnesses whose credibility and expertise were, for different reasons, undeniable. Deborah's trial begins in December 1995, 3 years after Gail's murder. The prosecution's star witnesses are the confessed hitman and A, nationally acclaimed pathologist. You can't discredit Dr. Biden. You can't do it. He's too good. He put the case together for us. His forensic brilliance was the undeniable truth-teller, definitively silencing all lingering doubt regarding the manner of death. Throughout her trial, Deborah Mosby strategically maintained her stoic silence, electing not to take the stand in her own defense. This is a constitutionally protected legal tactic, as a defendant cannot be legally compelled to incriminate themselves. However, this strategic silence also left state prosecutors free to skillfully and convincingly speculate on the deep-seated, insidious motives that drove her to orchestrate such a brutal act, presenting them to the jury as the logical, chillingly rational underpinnings of her profound malevolence. Deborah refuses to take the stand in her own defense, leaving state prosecutors to speculate on motive. If Gail died, then child support would stop, and that Social Security would start for the boys, which I believe at that time was going to be $1, $300 a month. My impression was that she just didn't like Gail Mosby. In fact, I think she hated her, and she just decided that her life would be better without her, and it was worth having her killed. The prosecution argued powerfully and with undeniable conviction that Deborah's actions were a horrific fusion of cold, calculating financial opportunism and pure, unadulterated, unbridled malice, a profound and twisted desire to eliminate an inconvenient rival and a perceived, ongoing burden, ultimately leading her to contract the cold-blooded killing of Gail. The jury, having meticulously listened to all the presented evidence, scrutinized every testimony, and deliberated carefully over the extensive facts, ultimately found Deborah Mosby guilty on all charges. However, in the subsequent crucial penalty phase, they became irrevocably deadlocked on the solemn recommendation for the death penalty, unable to reach a unanimous decision. Consequently, the presiding judge, following legal precedent, instead sentenced her to a term of life imprisonment. The jury convicts Deborah on all charges but becomes deadlocked on recommending the death penalty. Instead, she receives a life sentence. It was the final nail in the coffin, in the sense of, wow, she's where she belongs. She's in prison, and now she can't hurt anybody else. The hard-won triumph of justice, achieved through immense dedication, unwavering resilience, and a relentless pursuit of truth against formidable odds, provided a powerful and profound affirmation that even the most cunning, insidious, and cold-blooded evil would, eventually, face an unwavering reckoning and accountability. It was a testament to the uncompromising efforts of those who refused to let Gail Mosby's story end as a mere forgotten statistic. The aftermath, the enduring legacy of love, resilience, and unwavering spirit. The years that inexorably followed the momentous convictions, though bringing a measure of vital justice and an opportunity for gradual, arduous healing, also delivered their own unique, deeply painful challenges and, unfortunately, renewed heartaches for Gail Mosby's enduring family. The grim, complex realities of the American penal system, where the phrase life in prison can sometimes be a fluid, subjectively interpreted concept rather than an absolute, would prove to be another difficult and emotionally jarring lesson in the complexities of justice. In 2007, Billy Ray Ford and Richard Mosby were released from prison. In 2021, Deborah was released as well after serving 26 years of her sentence. One thing I learned from Debbie's conviction and from my dad's sentencing is that life in jail doesn't mean life in jail. The raw news of their release, particularly Deborah's, delivered a significant and painful emotional blow, an agonizing, huge gut punch for those who had carried the unbearable burden of their grief and the searing memory of Gail's violent death for such a long, arduous period. It's a huge gut punch knowing that they're out of prison. It felt, for a moment, as though the justice they had so arduously fought for had been partially undone, that the triumph had a bitter aftertaste. Despite the renewed anger, the deep-seated frustration, and the reawakened pain caused by these releases, the enduring and luminous legacy of Gail Mosby, meticulously preserved, passionately upheld, and lovingly reinforced by the unwavering love and steadfast moral guidance of her heroic parents. Frank and Jackie ultimately provided her sons, Bill and Joseph, with an inner strength, a profound sense of purpose, and an unbreakable resilience that transcended the bitterness and profound resentment. But I'll say this based on how my grandparents raised us. It's made the anger that we had towards them. It's made it small because what we have, it's way more important. What keeps my mom alive to me today is the relationship that I have with my brother, because she really instilled in us a sense of family, and we never let that go. I like to remind my own boys that I was a product of one of the greatest mothers this world could have ever had. So I want them to be able to understand that even though she's not around, she's still all with them. This powerful generational legacy ensures that Gail Mosby's life, rich in love and purpose, continues to touch and inspire, a shining beacon of unconditional affection that bravely shines far beyond the enduring shadow of murder. The profoundly disturbing narrative of Gail Mosby's murder serves as a chilling and unforgettable reminder of the insidious and corrosive nature of human malice, and how seemingly mundane domestic conflicts, when allowed to fester, fueled by deep-seated resentment, obsessive control, and a terrifying lack of empathy, can spiral catastrophically into cold-blooded, premeditated murder. It lays bare the unsettling reality of individuals like Deborah Mosby, whose toxic blend of unbridled resentment, absolute and unwavering control, and a shocking, pathological lack of genuine empathy can ultimately culminate in the most extreme, unimaginable acts of violence. Her casual and chilling belief, as revealed in the prosecution's theory, that life would simply be better without her, so starkly, self-servingly articulated, stands as a chilling testament to a mind profoundly devoid of fundamental human compassion, a mind terrifyingly willing to extinguish another life for mere personal convenience, perceived gain, and the satisfaction of absolute control. The subtle wit and gentle satire woven into this analysis here points not at the tragedy itself, which is sacred in its sorrow, but at the astonishing, almost comically petty, yet ultimately terrifying self-centeredness of such a criminal, viewing another precious human being's existence as nothing more than an inconvenient obstacle to her carefully constructed, egocentric universe. This poignant and complex case also stands as a powerful and enduring tribute to the tireless, often thankless, and frequently unheralded efforts of dedicated law enforcement officers and unwavering legal professionals who steadfastly refuse to accept an easy, convenient, or superficially presented answer. The profound, old police gut feeling, the meticulous, almost obsessive attention to a minute, yet critically significant detail, like a cracked picture frame, the unwavering conviction and profound professional courage demonstrated repeatedly in the face of an obstinate institutional authority figure, and the brilliant, transformative, and scientifically grounded forensic work of experts like Dr. Michael Biden, all synergistically converged with remarkable precision to peel back the intricate, deceptive layers of deceit and bravely expose the brutal, unvarnished truth. It eloquently and powerfully demonstrates that justice, though sometimes agonizingly delayed, fraught with immense challenges, and marked by painful compromises, can ultimately and truly prevail, driven by the relentless dedication and profound moral fortitude of those who courageously choose to speak for the voiceless victims, ensuring their truth is heard. Ultimately, Gail Mosby's profoundly human story is a vital, unforgettable, and deeply humanistic lesson, etched indelibly into the annals of criminal psychology, astute investigative triumph, and legal perseverance. It unequivocally underscores the critical importance of being vigilant, of paying acute attention, and of proactively listening to the quiet, often overlooked, alarms that subtly sound in the margins of everyday life, the friend's unsettling premonition, the child's intuitive and insistent disbelief, the experienced officer's subtle, yet profoundly persistent, professional instinct. It is a compelling and inspiring narrative of good, resiliently and ultimately triumphing over insidious evil, not through some sensationalized or cinematic explosion of drama, but through the slow, deliberate, often frustrating, yet ultimately effective, relentless grind of meticulous detective work, robust legal process, and an unwavering, unbreakable commitment to uncovering the truth. This comprehensive story serves as an invaluable educational beacon, urging us all to recognize the subtle yet potent signs of manipulative, psychopathic personalities, to extend unwavering support, compassion, and protection to victims tragically entangled in domestic conflicts, and, most profoundly, to never, ever underestimate the enduring power of familial love, human resilience, and the relentless, often arduous, pursuit of profound, restorative justice. Gail Mosby's vibrant spirit, indelibly defined by her unwavering devotion to her beloved family and her innately compassionate heart, lives on, a vivid and inspiring testament to a life exceptionally well-lived and a powerful legacy of unconditional love that even the darkest and most calculated evil could not ultimately diminish, extinguish, or erase from the collective memory. The profound lessons derived from her life and her tragic, yet resolved, death resonate, guiding us all towards greater empathy, sharper discernment, and a renewed, robust faith in the inherent human capacity for genuine justice.